Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our SEPTAR meeting, our February meeting.
Bienvenidos a todos, bienvenidos a la reunión de febrero.
Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Gracias por estar aquí con nosotros esta noche.
If you need Spanish interpretation, please click on the globe icon and choose Spanish.
Si necesita interpretación, por favor, seleccione el icono del mundo en su pantalla y luego seleccione el idioma español. Español es una de las opciones.
And English speakers should click English, right, Nora?
Yes,
Nora,
that's
we can hear you. So is that what we're supposed to hear you?
Well, I'm just introducing people so
Okay.
that I can tell them to select the,
Okay.
the Spanish.
Yes.
And
Okay.
when you all are ready to start, I'm going to go to the interpreter's room.
Perfect. So let's select our language of choice, so we can make a smooth transitions.
Vamos a comenzar ya en unos instantes. Si puede, por favor, seleccionar el icono, el símbolo del mundo ahí en su pantalla y seleccione el idioma español. En unos instantes voy a interpretar la reunión en español. Gracias.
Thank you. All right, we have a lot of things to tell you tonight. I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Okay, so here we are. This is our SEPTAR board. There are 5 people now. We're growing. We have Amanda Trice, community liaison, relatively new board member, and Alejandrina Reyes Sandoval, our Spanish liaison, joined us last month. I believe she's here tonight. Can't quite see. Alejandrina, are you here?
Yes, I am here.
Hi.
Hi.
So I'm gonna just go on to the next slide. Oh, sorry. So to those who are new to our SEPTAR meetings, I'm gonna tell a couple of things about who we are and what we do. We were founded in January 25, just had a birthday, 2007, as the first district-wide special education PTA. And currently we provide monthly workshops and presentations for everyone in the district and beyond. We organize disability awareness events, collaborating with the district, spreading information about disability, and provide social events for families. We would like to collaborate with everyone to provide more support, more inclusive support for after-school programs. And we're gonna do a fundraiser. This is our next slide. We're gonna do a fundraiser next month to be able to provide support for after-school programs and beyond. And we'll see what will happen with that. So please participate in our fundraiser next, anytime. Michelle would like to talk a little bit about fundraiser.
Yeah, so we're doing a dinner and a movie. It'll be on March 16th. That will be sort of taking the place of our monthly association meeting. So we have a movie that you will be able to watch from your computer at home. You have to buy a ticket. The website or the site to do that is on the flyer, which we're going to be distributing those in Peach Jar next couple weeks. But the movie is called This Is Not About Me. It's about a young woman with autism who kind of had struggles in school. She's nonverbal, and it kind of shows how she found her right place and a way to grow. It's a really good movie, and so we'll all watch it at the same time. It'll start at the same time at 7:15 p.m. And then it's like an hour long, and then after the movie we can come back together and talk about it on our Zoom link. And then we also have a dinner fundraiser. If you eat at Crouching Tiger on the 16th, then we can get 15% of your meal's price. And there you have to sign up ahead of time to get, like, they have to have a list of people who have committed to eat. So make sure if you want to do that, you do that, I think by March 13th. And like I said, you'll be getting this information. It'll be on our website, and it'll be distributed in Peach Jar. And you can always reach out to us at our web or at our email, septarinfo@gmail.com, if you have any questions. But we're really looking forward to it. We really hope, we can raise some money so we can support more programs that we're interested in doing for our kids, and we're also going to be looking for your input on what you want for your kids and for yourself, for us to help support you.
Sorry, I touched my mouse by accident. Thank you, Michelle. So we are also collecting some data and information about what you guys want to see offered in our district. What kind of program do you want for your kids, and what your needs are. So this is a survey that you can fill out. Please do, because we really need your feedback on that and what we can create collaboratively. This also will be distributed to everyone. We can probably also put the slides in the chat, so you can have all those links in the presentation as well. All right, so we want to make sure we have our treasurer's report done, because we kind of missed the last couple meetings. So the floor to Jessica.
Thank you. Yeah, we've had lots of exciting and good conversations the last couple of months, but now I get to really quickly bore you all with the treasurer's reports. They're pretty short this time. So this is going from November to December. We raised $105 through membership fees and donations. And then we had expenses of paying for Zoom for the year. We had brochures made about SEPTAR that are going out, I believe, when people have IEPs or when they sign registration packets, something like that. Elena would be probably have the right answer on that. But we made 200 brochures. And then we had a payment for a logo design as well. So are there any questions about November through December? Alrighty.
The brochures are available to anyone to distribute to your friends. You can pick it up from SEPTAR. They're at the office too, at the special education office. And I believe that Maeve was talking about putting it with when you get your IEP rights, parent rights, they will be included, the brochure will be included with those rights. I'm not sure if it's happening yet, but that's the plan. Not sure where where's that stands at the moment.
It isn't happening yet, but that is our plan moving forward. It will probably be a black and white version of the brochure that will just automatically be attached as, you know, an extra page to the rights.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And I don't see any questions, so I'm going to move on to December to January. Again, we had a deposit for membership fees was $10.50. And we had a check that was cashed from the Justice Department for a tax filing. Are there any questions on those?
I have a question, not specifically on this, but somewhat related to this and fundraising that's starting. But is there a target that has been set that you're hoping to raise in order to go towards services and programs that you're mentioning? Are you kind of waiting to hear back on the survey that comes back from families, or do you kind of have a loose target in mind to start out with, or kind of what's the target that you want to raise? And I don't know if you can just provide a little more color around that.
Sure, hold on one second.
Michelle, do you want to speak on that?
So we are, as far as like after school programs go, we are like at the very ground level as far as figuring out how we can make that work, whether it be at one school site. What we'd want to do is to maybe be able to provide support people that would be staffed in the programs to help the kids that are there. But like I said, we're still at the very beginning of figuring that out. I couldn't even guess what that would cost. But some of the other things, just needing to spend money on more materials to be able to give out to people. We want to get a banner, like different things like that. We want to try some just like classroom support, like if a teacher wants to have a gathering with her class and her students just to have socialization, we want to be able to support them by providing supplies to do arts with the kids, to be able to provide food for the gathering. Those are the kinds of things like more specific that we're thinking about doing. Didn't even think about a target, to be honest, because we don't know how much like an inclusive program would cost at this point. Fundraising, I would say, with SEPTAR has not happened in many, many years. So none of us that are here right now have, we haven't really had much experience with it. So that's where we're at on it. But we have plans, we're, even, our speakers, and we have people speaking, to us, to our families, they're doing it for free. We would like to be able to give them something, or to, just to be able to support more people by, giving them a gift, because they give so much to us. But yeah, like I said, we're all very new at this. And if anybody has suggestions for how to do more fundraising, get better outcomes for fundraising, we're definitely open to that.
And then, so as Michelle was saying, SEPTAR hasn't really done much fundraising recently, and I know I'm new to the board, and to SEPTAR really. So I don't have any prior experience with it. As in terms of our actual budget that we approved, we had estimated $300 in membership dues to come in and $550 in donations. I believe we've pass both of those numbers, at least the total of them. Membership might be slightly under and donations might be slightly higher. And then we budgeted just hoping that we raised at least $100 for the movie fundraiser. And we were really planning to kind of see how it goes and then use fundraising, I think, this year to give us a better idea for next year's budget of what our targets should be.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question, Jennifer. I think we can really use your help if you have some time to collaborate with us.
Which is why I almost didn't ask the question.
I mean, I think we're just kind of, testing the waters, what happens this year, and then we'll see if we're successful and what we need to do for next year. Hopefully we'll get a lot of interest, and we want to start at one site. We want to start at, just supporting one program, and then see. It's probably going to be small at first, and then we'll try to grow.
Yeah, I think at least initially I can forward to someone or share some of the passive fundraisers, like what you're doing now. It's what we'd call passive fundraiser at Roosevelt. It's at least some of the passive fundraisers that have been more successful that have been at Roosevelt. And I can share those with you, the ones that we've seen a decent turnout for, and some that have like a higher percentage of payback, that are fun, community building.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Sounds good. All right. Should I go to the next slide?
One more month and it's even shorter. So for this past month, January through February, we had a membership deposit of $62.75, and that was that.
Sorry, thank you so much, Jessica. Any questions for Jessica? Oh. Sorry, I cannot control anything here. Okay, here to the exciting part of the evening. We are so fortunate to have Pat Hornbecker with us today, a human rights advocate for people with developmental disabilities and the president of ARC of California. I would love to welcome you to our small group tonight. And we were thinking to make it kind of like interactive, conversational presentation. So we put together a couple of questions, and hopefully to get more questions from the audience as well. But why don't you introduce yourself and anything you want to say before we start our questions?
Okay. Well, my name is Pat Hornbecker, and obviously my hair is a different color. That was pre-COVID, and this is post-COVID. So this is pretty much how I go now. That's my son, Joseph, who is 42 years old, which makes me officially 105. As any parent, especially kids, know, you definitely grow older faster. So it's because there's a learning curve that is pretty steep for all of us family members. And my son, Joseph, has Angelman syndrome, as does Michelle's sons. He lives in his own apartment in San Francisco, right down near Fisherman's Wharf. It's a 2-bedroom apartment with a live-in companion. And he is supported by the ARC of San Francisco on a variety of shifts to get him in and out of the community. He does not work at a paid job. He does meaningful volunteerism. It's a decision that was made as an adult, but how he got where he is because of how I educated myself. And Joseph's disability, because he's 42, no one knew what Angelman syndrome was when he was born. So he never received a diagnosis till about 11 or 12 years old. But nonetheless, I had to struggle through 6 pediatricians. I moved a couple of school districts and that was because my husband's job was changing at the time. But I changed pediatricians because everyone was telling me there was nothing wrong with my son. And that was crazy making for me. But once we established that there was something different about his learning style, we joined we got into an infant program and preschool. And I have to tell you that the only way I was able to be successful and create the life that Joseph has now was by joining a variety of family groups, just like you guys. I actually formed my own special education moms group, and we had speakers. We did exactly what you were doing. Your budget's a lot better than ours was. And but I joined the CAC, and that is the #1 best thing I ever did, because I met other families, other members of my group, my peers, who were also trying to educate themselves. It also taught me about the school system, and I didn't know anything about. I had been raised here in San Francisco, but I had gone to public schools. I didn't know anything about kids with disabilities. And so I didn't know my rights. And that was the #1 thing CAC helped me learn. We worked very closely with the special ed director, and we created a lot of parent education tools. We had workshops just like you guys are doing. I actually found, Elena, you asked me to find it, and I actually found my special education handbook that we did for the CAC, because the duty of the CAC is to advise the Board of Education and the special ed department on how and what they're doing, as well as support them in educating parents. And so we created this. I mean, the paper is probably rotting off the pages right now because this is 35 years old, although the law is still the same. This is what's incredible to me when I found it, because you dared me to go find it, Elena, and I did. And it reminded me of those times when I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what the rules were. So the #1 thing I had to do was learn my rights. And the rights, and I was learning this also while Joseph was in his infant program, because all of us were asking the same questions of one another. That, you know, you can refer yourself to special ed. You have a right to bypass the process of an SST or whatever. I don't even think they have SSTs anymore. But you have a right to make the referral for an assessment. Know what the timelines are, so that when you make the referral, you actually know that there has to be an assessment plan back at you in 15 days. The assessment, what is it going to be? It can't be one test. It has to be more than one way of looking at your son or daughter and what the disability was. I didn't even know what mine was, so I didn't know what to even employ as a tool. And in San Francisco at the time, they weren't allowing IQ tests, so none of those were ever allowed, and now I don't think they use them at all either. But understanding that you go through an assessment process and you can understand what these tests are, that you then get the reports. So many of the family members that I worked with never got the assessment plan, the assessment report back to them until they showed up at an IEP meeting. And that was very discouraging, because they were reading the IEP, the assessment plan, as they're sitting there at the IEP. But you have the right to have that translated for you, made to make you understand it in a language, told to you in a language that you understand, not necessarily Spanish or Chinese or English, but in words you understand, not in psychologies, not in a language that's too technical for everyday people to understand. Then I had to learn who the players were, even in this world of special education, and how is special education different than regular education. Joseph was my oldest, so I didn't know one way or the other, but knowing how the principal fits in and the teacher fits in and the special ed director, the elementary school director versus secondary, who's on first and what's on second was pretty much the game you have to play to know who and how you're going to advocate for your kid. Then you have to think about, what do you want? We had special day classes primarily in San Francisco at the time, because this was in the 80s, mind you. So a lot of special day classes. But I also educated myself with a lot of other groups that I was speaking with, TASH, and I worked with, TASH used to be called, I think it's just called TASH now, but it was the Association for the Severely Handicapped, and which scared me to even go to one of their conferences. I thought I was going to be, I don't know, I didn't know what I was going to do, but it was very scary. But that's when I started learning about different ways of educating kids with disabilities. And then I understood that I could even the playing ground by understanding these different means of teaching and learning. It helped that I also understood the different kinds of placements, whether it was a special day class. They never had inclusion then, but they had mainstreaming. Mainstreaming was kind of a dump and hope situation where you would put kids with special ed, from special ed into a regular ed classroom for a certain period of time, but not necessarily the whole day. The problem with that was often that there wasn't a lot of support that went with that kid when they went into the other classroom. And then the regular ed teacher was also stressed out about it. So there was a lot of controversy over the whole mainstreaming thing, but it was a different kind of placement. The resource specialist situation where kids were in regular education and pulled out for their needs was the other opportunity, but that was not going to fit Joseph. I mean, Joseph was definitely in a situation where he really needed a more intense situation. So he was in a special day class until 4th, 5th grade. By then, I had learned that, had joined CASE. I was with the Community Alliance for Special Education, and I learned what the laws were, what the regulations were. I learned how the process worked. I learned how to write an IEP. I learned how to write the goals. I learned the right language to use. They got into the IEP, or IEP, excuse me. Learning the difference between an IEP and an IPP. Do you know how many families did not know the difference and still don't? I run into family members who, during their school age years, they'll call me about their IEP, and then I'll ask them about their social worker at the regional center and their IPP, and they say, I don't know what you're talking about. And they do have a social worker somewhere, but all of them are so overloaded, they probably haven't been contacted. But most of the services during those school age years are going to be provided by the school district. So that was an important little loophole for getting different kinds of services for my son. While he was in middle school and high school, he had music therapy, and that was given to him through the regional center, not the school district. It was not a related service that was available for a school district to offer, but it was something that we could validate as a need for Joseph's communication skills to enhance his ability to participate in his classroom. When we got to about 4th grade, it was a time for me to decide whether or not we were going to actually go forward with community integration. And that's when, or inclusion is what we ended up calling it. I started a task force that came out of the CAC working with the special ed director to see how we could implement inclusion in San Francisco. And Joseph got a 1-on-1 aide in the 5th grade and moved on to middle school and was fully included from 6th grade through high school. And so it was a big deal. It was a big change, but it was the best thing that ever happened to him. He never felt more part of the school. And he had a fabulous aide who's now a best friend of mine, of course, but it was great for him. And that full inclusion was something that scared a lot of my friends, though. And they said to me, Pat, you're not going to make all of us do inclusion, are you? Well, no. I said, you can do whatever you want. The law says it's an individual IEP. It's an individual education plan. So if you choose a special day class, you can choose it. But you need to understand that the law states you have to be in the least restrictive environment. And you can only be removed from that regular education environment as much as the services dictate to support your needs. Now, I know, Elena, you have a lot of questions, and I could go on forever about the ins and outs of this. Extended school year, we could talk because we had that all the time. Keeping records is an important thing. I cannot tell you how many family members said, but I called so-and-so and that she said this and now it hasn't happened. Never, never take a phone call and not follow it up with an email that says, thanks for the call. This is what I understood us to say. And this is how I understand us to proceed. That way you have a record of what's going on. Keep all of the records that you have from the assessments that document the needs. The last IEP Joseph had in the school system was 26 pages long. It had 26 goals. It had a bazillion things, and the teacher looked at me and was almost going crazy. I said, he's fully included in this high school. I do every single one of these goals every day. It teaches you how to relate to a nonverbal adult 18-year-old boy who is big, probably bigger than some of you, and we want to be able to allow him to participate in the school to the best and fullest that he can. And it was great. Once they found out how they could implement the IEP as easily as it was written, he was very, very successful. So I don't know how, I mean, I could keep going, but you probably would like some questions to be asked, and that could redirect my conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. We were just hoping that, you know, it was kind of part of your presentation already, but we have a couple of questions about inclusion and how specifically you were able to have that done for your son in the district. So like what specific steps, if it's
Okay.
if you can kind of elaborate.
Yeah. What when Joseph was in a special day class in 4th grade and 5th grade, being in the classroom was horribly boring for him. So we started back in the day, they called it community-based training. They used to take kids out on the street and teach them how to cross the street. That was a really bad program. But what we ended up doing is I had the one-on-one aid with Joseph, and he left the classroom constantly to do jobs in the other parts of the school. There was a recycling program that he was in charge of, where he collected all the cans in every classroom and took it and recycled the cans. There was the fourth grade teacher, fourth grade, what are you, 8 years old, 9 years old? Nah, probably 9 or 10 years old at that time. He went across the hall to Mr. B's room and had to sharpen all the pencils. So he'd go over, he'd collect the pencils, and he'd sharpen them with his electric sharpener, and he'd return them. This is fourth grade, mind you. And then he was going and he worked in the office. He worked in the cafeteria. And these were, he would go back and forth and in and out of his classroom, his special day class, because we didn't have inclusion at the time. And that's how it started. I didn't call it inclusion because they would have freaked out. Instead, I just said, we're going to create jobs for Joseph to get him out of this little classroom where he is not doing any substantial work. Joseph doesn't read. The reading and the writing and the arithmetic stuff was just not going to happen for him. So he was trying to do a purposeful educational job in and on the campus. And that's what we ended up starting in 4th and 5th grade. By the time he got to 6th grade, when you go to a middle school, you're going to a lot of different classes. So you're moving around quite a bit. In those 6th grade, different groups, each teacher included him. Back then, we did a lot of the group education, so that the kids were all sitting in round tables in all the classrooms. It was a big thing at the time. But as a result, Joseph had a table with a group of kids. His special ed aide, at this point, we are trying to fade her away from him. So she was in the classroom, but she was away from him. And he was able to participate in the work at the table. They were writing reports or looking things up, or I think it was a history. They were doing maps to do a report on a country in Africa. So he was drawing on his paper, and the kids with him, his peers, were sitting at the same table. The modification of the curriculum was more so Joseph could participate without and learning how to participate with his peers. He was not learning the report on Africa. He was not learning trigonometry. He was not learning social studies in each of the classes, but we modified all of the classroom environments that allowed him to participate to the best of his ability. Joseph and kids like him who are nonverbal have a tendency to make a lot of noise. Being nonverbal does not mean you're quiet. But being able to control himself and to want to be like his peers was huge. Joseph used to drool horribly when he was in 3rd and 4th grade, but the kids were the best changes for him because he was in those regular classes. They just said, "Ew, Joe, stop." And that literally, I wrote that in the IEP. I said, when he drills, just say, "Ew, Joe, stop." He started closing his mouth and he stopped drooling. End of the school year, boom, done. I mean, that sounds silly, but it's true. And I know I shared with Elaine and Michelle that when he was in high school, he took driver's training because they had those trailers in the schoolyard where you would take the driver's training classes. They look like a video game. He loved it. And his peers were right there with him. Now, he probably crashed that car 100 times when he was watching it, but he was with his peers. It made a difference. It made a difference in his ability, his pride about going to school, the friends he made. It wasn't tokenism. It wasn't taking care of kids down the hall. by this time, when I was fully including him in the school system, I was getting to worry about what his adult life was going to be like. And that's when I joined the ARC. And well, about the mid 80s. And so I was with the ARC of San Francisco, who supports Joseph. I'm president of the ARC of California, as you've heard. But it was, and I was still working as an advocate for CASE. But what I found is there's so many disparities and discriminations for families in there, in our special ed world, who are trying to receive the exact same services that I am. And I have to say, I'm a woman of white privilege, and I was able to know the system, and I was able to sit at a table with people who look more like me than not and receive the information in a language I understood to design a program that supported my son, but also they believed what I said about my son. And I found in the years I advocated with CASE, and I would sit 8 hours a day writing IEPs over the phone, listening to families say, but I tell them he does this and they don't believe me. They were not believing these family members. So then I started going to IEPs, and I was telling Elena and Michelle that I'm so glad these are Zoom now, because I could have done a lot more had I not been traveling all over San Francisco to go to these IEP meetings. And there were sometimes all I had to do was show up. And I know that sounds arrogant of me, but it's the way the system works. And it's not good, it's not right. And the ARC of California has done some work to create an L-ARC de California. L-ARC de California is like it's a collaboration of Spanish-speaking groups that are joined together to do the same work that the ARC of California does, allowing the Spanish-speaking families and organizations to run it itself, kind of parallel. The chair of L-ARC de California is the vice president on my board. And what we have found is through studies that Spanish-speaking families receive half the services of white families. Now that's adult services through the IEPP and the regional center. I think the discrepancy and the discrimination or disparity, whichever word you want to use, in the school system is probably not as severe, but I'm not sure of that either. It's very difficult to negotiate these systems. Families need to understand that extended school year is something you can get, that behavior management, some of the related services that family says they can't receive, or that they have to receive them somewhere down the hall, or that they can't go to a school nearby. You have a right to go on any campus, in any public school and visit. And I used to visit my school district schools all over the school before I went to my IEP. So I knew what placement I needed for my son. I'd already picked out classroom A, B, or C. And I did that. And then we'd write the IEP together. And there was obviously no other choice but this school. For whatever reason, this was going to be the right placement. And it was very important that I knew what the other schools looked like. What do the other classrooms look like? I live across the street from a non-public school. Kids, when I first moved in, we had kids that were 3 years old to about 16 placed there, wards of the court, that had been removed from their families' homes. And that's a different placement altogether. But I had to learn what those were in order to help families that I was representing whose family, they were having their kids threatened to be taken away from them. So it's important that you educate yourself. What does your school district look like? I saw one of your slides said that you have only 188 students in special day classes. I think that's great. Out of all of your students in your school district. In San Francisco, we're just about 100% fully included. But who is modifying the curriculum? Who is writing that into the IEP? Does it get written in there? If it doesn't get written in there, it ain't happening. And that's important to understand, but sometimes those are the steps that get skipped. That people don't understand that they can write those little tidbits in. You can't be on the bus for too long because you have your son or daughter has a seizure disorder and they can't ride the bus for an hour across town. Joseph loves riding the bus. I used to put him on the longest route there was. But there are some kids that can't do that. That can be factored in. It's a qualifying factor for getting to and from school. When I was working with Case, we wrote a resource book for families. It's with Disability Rights of California. It was called PAI back then, but it's a federally funded group of attorneys that will represent parents. They usually do more class action suits. They don't represent a lot of individuals anymore, but they do a lot. And can I share my screen, Michelle? I know you put the handbook in the chat, and if you look it up, is it okay if I share my screen?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, Elena, okay, sorry. Talking to the wrong person. I'm gonna go. I learned how to do this. Okay, this is the Special Education Rights and Responsibility Handbook. It is written in 5 languages. And this handbook is, these chapters are the basic rights, how to deal with an assessment, eligibility criteria. We got a lot of families back then. My kid has a learning disability and they won't give me special ed. Why? Because they didn't understand eligibility criteria. So you had to get the right assessment. So we go back and get the right assessments. How to do the IEP process. You write down the strengths and the weaknesses. You are writing down goals. You're writing down how they learn, how they emote, how they speak, how they communicate. There's information on all the related services to include extended school year. Due process. When you go to an IEP, you're supposed to receive your rights, but you're also supposed to receive information on low income or no cost representation if you want to get into the due process or file a complaint. Understanding what a mediation is. People are afraid of that. Who do you take to an IEP? I hope you don't go alone. I hope you don't go to a doctor alone, for that matter. I hope everyone goes with a friend, somebody, a husband, an advocate. It doesn't have to be an attorney. You don't want to raise the hackles. You don't want to make it difficult to have a communication, but you want to hear the same things and you want to walk away with the right information. Understanding the least restrictive environment. I think that's probably the one that many families end up asking about, because they say, well, they say they only do that here. They don't do it there. Well, they can't say that. When you know the players, you have to understand what they are saying to you. Is this the right law? Is this policy? Or is this the policy that's been handed out by word of mouth in that school or in that school district?
Pat,
yeah.
could you show us how to change the language?
Okay, yeah, I gotta move you. Let me see. So if you see up here, select the language. In the upper right, Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese. And then it would, you want me to do it?
Sure. So I put the link in the chat and you can all access it.
Okay, but now I can't read this, but yeah, and this is fabulous. They've updated it probably 16, 17 times, but there's 16 chapters. I can't tell you what these are now, but
Yeah, you can go back to English, it's fine.
anyway, but
I just want to say one thing, that I too actually took a class and we studied this whole book chapter by chapter, this support for families in San Francisco, the Family Resource Center. So
yeah, Family Resource
there's a
Centers.
lot of information in here.
But it's written in plain language and it asks the questions that you are asking yourself. They're not complicated questions. They're not legal questions. They do quote they cite the law, and so that you can understand what the answers are. This is free.
Mhm.
You can download it, you can copy it, you can do whatever you want with it. But it is probably the best. I wish it had been around before we wrote it, but it's great. And it's free because it comes through PAI, which is now DRC, Disability Rights of California. And they are federally funded. They have to do this. And school districts have a responsibility to train families. So you got it from your support for families at your FRC, but I don't think there's anything wrong with the school district actually using this as a form of education. You guys could use it yourself and go through a chapter at a time. It really is an excellent book. It's a great resource. It allows people to feel like they know what they're talking about when you get to the IEP. I mean, when I get to an IEP, when it was mine or even someone else's, I'd already read all the reports. I'd cased out all the plans that were pending. We knew what support services were necessary. I knew the frequency and duration we wanted. I knew all of it. And then we just sat down and you talk about it because I'd read the reports and these people already agreed with the reports. And unless I had something to object to, if I was objecting to one of the reports, then we'd have something else to talk about. But most of the time we had independent reports, or we had the regular ones. We knew what we had to do. Knowing the options and having that picture when you get to the IEP, it's easy. It's not a fight. It shouldn't be. Nobody wants these kids to fail. Everybody wants success. But to do that, you have to know all the information before you sit down at the table. And how many, but you don't have to sign it as a parent. You don't have to sign it at the IEP. They say, okay, we're done, sign it. You can take it home. You can think about it, knowing full well that it will not start, the services will not start until you sign it. But you could sign for half of it. And if there's one service you guys just can't agree on, then sign all the rest of it with an exception and figure out when you're going to meet again to discuss how you're going to resolve the differences. It's a negotiation, and it takes a skill for sure to be able to negotiate. And that's why you need people with you. You need friends. You need people that know the information, know your kid as well. Nobody knows that your kid is as well as you do, but has the interest in the success of your own child. But cultural competence is not a strength of regional centers and of school districts. The biggest problem is things, they don't have translators. Papers everything's in English. It's very difficult to get things translated. But if you don't have someone who can do some of that translating for you, how are you writing an IEP? So if you have a friend that can help you read the assessments that have been sent to your house, then you can build a plan at home before you even get there. You don't need to break into a cold sweat because you're at an IEP meeting. Now, I ran most of my IEP meetings. Obviously, you can see the way I'm talking now. But the people that are at an IEP should be a principal, a teacher, and the parent. Do you know how many parents said, I got my IEP in the mail and I don't understand it? What? A lot of pre-written IEPs. A lot of assessors that don't show up at IEP meetings to explain them to the parent. That's not the way it's supposed to go, but that's why you can prepare yourself. If you know your rights and you know the law and you know the players and you find the resources through a family resource center, through that handbook, through this group, SEPTAR, which is fabulous, you work together to advocate for one another. Because isn't that how we all learned? Somebody says, hey, I've got this going on in my class. It's great. We have an after school. You guys are trying to build an after school program. Find a fabulous one and duplicate it. You know, build a business plan. You guys could do this. I could hear it. And I know how to fundraise, and I think Jen does too. She just doesn't want to do it right now. But I mean, you can't have this stuff thrown at you. We all have the right to receive notice of when these meetings are. And they're scheduled at your convenience, not on your convenience. Well, I'm sorry, at this school, we do all of our IEPs on Wednesdays at 10 o'clock. I'm sorry, how many people on this call are working? How many people are busy at 10 o'clock? How many people can leave their patients or leave their office to hold, even on Zoom, be a part of it, let alone drive across town? I was a dental hygienist for 45 years. There was no way I could get away from my patients. You really have to, you know, you are in the driver's seat so much more than you believe as a parent. Parents think that the school districts and the law are victimizing you. It was all written for you and your child. You just have to believe that it can work, and you have to build the resources around you. Give me another question. I'm sorry. Come on, Nora.
Thank you so much. Should we move on to the Q&As maybe? What do you think? Okay. I'm gonna share my screen for a minute because we have a couple of questions here. I'm gonna pass it to Michelle actually. Where is it? Here we go.
Oh, there's my question.
So
So you kind of answered it, but why do you feel like inclusion is the best model for learning? And I think it's sort of changed. Inclusion should be like sort of the same for everybody, but yet different. So just give us your thoughts.
For it, Joseph. I believe it was the best learning model for Joseph. But my best friend was scared to death that I was going to make her and the whole school district do it. She liked her safe little special day class for her son. Her son had a severe learning disability. They had a class of 14, 17 kids in the classroom, and they all had a learning disability, okay? And they had a great teacher, and he learned a lot. So that was working for him. Joseph, which back in those days, they labeled people by their disability because they didn't know what he was. They called him severely, profoundly handicapped. And therefore, he was put in an SDC with a lot of other kids who didn't talk, didn't walk, didn't communicate, couldn't read, and he was learning absolutely nothing in that environment. Absolutely nothing. And socially, he could not even make any friends. So that's when I just tricked the school district into moving him from his special day class. He was still on the rolls of the special day class for 2 years, but he spent 10% of his day in that classroom. And so when I could see he could be successful out of that classroom and learn, I said, I don't need to have him in that classroom. So that's why I didn't believe it was at first. I was scared to death. I said, what's the worst thing that's going to happen if I put him in a classroom? He won't learn anything? Guess what? He wasn't learning anything in the SDC either. I would have taken him back, but my girlfriend, she had a different situation. So I advocated like crazy for her to make sure that she had what she needed. That's the short answer. I don't do short.
Thank you. We have a hand up. Jocelyn, please go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
We're ready for a question from Jocelyn.
Mhm.
I don't know if they're able to unmute themselves. Jocelyn, do you hear us?
Oops. Are all these questions over here?
So we have a next question. I was hoping Alejandrina can ask that.
Oh, ok. Tengo una pregunta. Explique cómo ha observado discriminación en el sistema y cómo ha ayudado a las familias de habla hispana a superarlo.
Yes, I have a question. Can you explain how you have observed discrimination in the special education setting, and how have you helped others to with this challenge?
Well, I think I hit on this a little bit already, in that the family members that I have represented did not receive their assessments reports. They did not have them explained to them. They were at a big disadvantage going to IEPs. They were often just told point blank at the IEP that they could not receive the OT or PT, physical therapy or occupational therapy that they were requesting, or the speech therapy, some of even just the basics. Validating behavior problems, especially back in my day, when you asked for behavioral support or behavioral assessments, they almost didn't exist. So there was a much easier tendency to say no. There was also, though, the cultural conflict, that family members did not feel their child was safe in school if they were not in a special day class, because a special day class was often small, 12, 10 people with many aides in the classroom. The paraprofessionals often spoke Spanish, so were more supportive than if they were in a classroom with no Spanish speaking support. So when I talked to different families, this is what I was told was their problem. The data I quoted was from the regional center that services are denied or not delivered at a 50% loss to Spanish-speaking families. And the navigating is exactly what I've just been doing today, and that handbook.
Thank you. Our next question is, tell us a little bit more about Arc of California and what you do for a disabled community.
Well, the Arc of California is the state chapter. We have 21 chapters across the state, and each of those chapters provide services to people with developmental disabilities. Most of them, some do provide services to children, school age. There may be childcare, after school care. Some run preschools. Some of them do run respite programs. The Arc of San Francisco is an example. We do job training, job education. We prepare people to get their jobs, find houses to live in so that they move out. Joseph moved out of my apartment into his apartment when he was 20 years old. So he was in the school system and living in his own apartment at the same time. So it was juggling quite a lot for him, but it made the transition actually quite easy. So the Arc of California is trying to deliver and guarantee the rights of people with developmental disabilities, 400,000 of them in this state, to have equal access to services, whether they're school age or whether they're adults, because we have an entitlement in the state that guarantees the state has to deliver services that are needed to people with developmental disabilities. And that's our mission. How we do it, we try and be as creative as we can. The state office itself does not provide services. We have created El Arc de California. We are doing a public policy or advocacy conference in April, but these are the kinds of things we do. We provide grants and support to our local chapters and other groups.
Is there an arc of San Mateo County? Like, I know
No.
what would be our arc that we're
Your arc
where we
would be
live?
your arc would be my arc. The Arc of San Francisco has offices in Marin, San Francisco, and in San Mateo County. But any chapter I would hook you up with people at the Arc San Francisco, but the Arc of Alameda is across the bay. It's not a jurisdictional thing like school districts work. If you want to if you live in one district and want to go to school in another district, you got to get an OER, you got to there's a lot more bureaucracy, but for ARCs, it's not, because we're not legal or legislative. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, because I always know, I get like the emails, like the Monday memos, like I get a lot of info from the ARC, but I just wasn't sure if it was, like
Yeah,
you
we
said,
don't provide
jurisdictional.
services. We are the umbrella over the 21 chapters, and then each of the states across the country are part of the Arc of the United States. And I was on that board at some point in time as well for about 10 years, and they monitor and manage a lot of the advocacy at the federal level, just because I can't spread my brain any thinner than it is. And so they do a lot of the federal work to ensure Social Security and Medicaid continues for all of our kids.
Yeah, there's so much, there's so much to advocate for. I feel like, I have 2 kids, right, with significant disabilities, and it's like, I feel like I'm constantly like going between them, like my son needs this, my other son needs that. And, it's just, and then I look at the greater picture, right? Like the big picture of like, the adulthood piece, but also just their treatment in this world, right? And how they should be treated and be included in things. And it's so important. And I know that's sort of a lot of what the ARC does, is just making sure that things aren't taken away, right? Like the right to vote. I know the right to marry, right? That's a big thing right now.
Right.
That's
It is.
being able to get married and not lose your federal money, right? The money that, because you're forced to live in poverty. So I appreciate like keeping up with that, and I should figure out so I could share with everybody how they can get that info, because like every week, like it's something interesting to read and just be like, okay, look, they're working on this. Like, how can I, how can I help?
You can go to the website of both thearc.org. That's the federal, the ARC of the United States. That's the one in Washington, and they have their version of a Monday morning memo. And you can sign up for their action alerts, because their action alerts are very efficient. You click on them, it tells you who your senators or congressmen are. The state ones tell you who your assemblyman and senator are, to have them vote for or against whatever it is we're trying to get for. But we also have a big self-advocacy group, excuse me, that has across the state in a lot of different groups, but we try to bring them together. They are the ones that we took the word retarded out of the law. That was the ARC's doing. So, and that's why the ARCs are the ARCs. They used to be, when they were started 70 years ago, they had the R word in there, but now nobody, that's passé. And well, respect for all people with disabilities has been something, using person first language, which is now out. Excuse me. I remember when person first language started, and now apparently it's out. You can be whatever you want to be. And so everybody's identifying themselves differently. And that's great, especially with the intersectionality of disabilities and sexuality and gender and lifestyle. It's huge. So don't pigeonhole our kids and don't pigeonhole us. So another question?
I actually have a question about the R word. So it's been taken out of the law, like a special education law, but has it been taken out of, like, say, textbooks, of medical books, or is it still there?
Yes, the AMA is a lot slower to change, as is a lot of other, and they're trying to change it. The DSM has changed, but I mean, it's, yes, but the law has changed. And when speaking to, for, and with people with disabilities, they now are spoken to as a person with a disability and not labeling them with anything else that they choose not to be identified as.
It's interesting. I'm taking, I'm enrolled into teachers credentials program, and we're learning about different disabilities, and they use the word retardation in textbooks and even in classes. And I'm like, why is it not taken out? Why do we still use it? Why is it still okay to use it?
I want to know why you're still using books. I thought everything was online. I'm sorry, that's, I'm an old lady. I still have books. I can't explain the education system at that point. I worked with San Francisco State, which has an excellent special ed department years and years ago, and they had some great teachers, and they had a fabulous department. They had great teachers that came out of that program. And that's where I learned about inclusion. It's where I learned about different kinds of speech therapy. And they were ahead of the game. But at that time, the R word was still in books. It was a way to pigeonhole people. I mean, I was very, very pleased that Joseph had no diagnosis until he was 12, because then nobody could put me in a box. Because at that time I saw them taking, well, this is where we put the kids with Down syndrome, and this is where we put the kids with autism, and this is where we put the kids we don't know what to do with. And that's what was wrong with special day classes. And that was too much of a thing, but that was also 30 years ago. It's not that way anymore.
One more question, actually. Can you say a little bit about the LARC, the Spanish organization?
Yeah, LARC de California. You can see, there's probably a link to it at the Arc of California's website.
Yeah, I put it in the chat too.
Oh, okay. But I did, you want me to explain it again?
Yeah, a little bit. Mhm.
Okay. It is a joining of Spanish-speaking leaders across the state, some of whom have organizations behind them. Some are parent groups, some are Congreso Familiar is one of the groups that are part of our LARC de California. It is not individuals. You don't go join LARC de California as a single member. We are trying to bring together Spanish-speaking organizations across the state to discuss their needs, wants, desires, and how effective the Lanterman Act and the civil rights laws in California are being implemented for and with them. Now with the FRCs, we are trying to work across the state with the FRCs to, and actually we're also trying to work with the CACs to make sure that there's an education piece for the Spanish-speaking families, and they'll all be connected through LARC to California. We had a summit in September, and we're having 4 more summits, I think, in the next year. And these people are coming together to develop action plans to explain the disparities and the resolution. We know what the disparities are because they've already done the survey, but to create solutions to the disparities. And although I don't know why they call them disparities, it's just plain old discrimination as far as I'm concerned. But anyway.
I would like to invite people to ask questions. And some people-
Nora,
Go ahead.
Nora, comentar algo. Yo conozco el grupo de Congreso Familiar y es un grupo que da mucho entrenamiento. Ahorita están en un entrenamiento de lo que viene siendo la IP. Son 4 módulos y están bien interesantes porque te hablan de los objetivos, de todo el proceso. Este sábado va a ser la última capacitación, pero sí dan mucha información muy buena.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I am very familiar with the Congreso Familiar. They provide a lot of training in regards to IEPs. The trainings are broken into 4 sections, and they explain to you everything related to objective services, everything related to the IEPs. And this Saturday will be our last training session, but there's a lot of great information.
It's a fabulous organization. And they were probably the inspiration to the Arc of California's LARC to California. They are fabulous.
Did our Spanish speakers, did they hear that information? That Alejandrina said? Okay. Oh, cool, great. Thank you, Alejandrina.
And all of their trainings are in Spanish, so you can, there was something I referred to you, both of you, Elena and Michelle, last week that came through. I forget what the training was now. There's so many of them. See, if you, part of the reason I know it sounds hard to know the law or the regulations that you're operating in with an IEP. But if you don't know them, you don't know that the policy that someone sitting across the table from you is telling you, well, it's the policy here to do this XYZ. You have no grounds to say that's illegal. That's violating my rights if you don't know the law. And that's oftentimes when they have staff development days and they say, this is the way we're going to do this now. And the teachers don't know any different. They haven't studied special ed law. Even if they are a special ed teacher, they don't teach them the law. The same with your social worker at the regional center. A social worker at a regional center is a social worker. And they've had some training about the Lanterman Act and the laws, but they don't know them. I knew them better than they did. And it was easy if somebody told me, this is the policy in our district or in our regional center to do this, 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 and this. I'm saying, I'm sorry, that's a violation of my rights. You can't do that. I'll file a complaint.
There was a question in the chat that was somehow only directly to me. It was, I'm gonna read it. It was in Spanish. You Google Translate to translate it. So they asked when they examine to see if a student has a learning disability, is it okay that they don't tell you the type of a disability they specifically found?
No, because if they found, I mean, if they don't know what it is, then they didn't do a very good report. You need to have enough information to make a decision. How can you support a learning disability that you don't understand what it is? You can't write an IEP that says, these are the interventions we are going to put in play in this classroom for this child when we don't really fully understand the disability. So I would have taken that report that was inadequate and asked for more information. Now, maybe there was more information and someone was just being lazy about writing a report because they had to get it done by tomorrow. Or maybe it was just not clear enough. So I would ask for that to be explained to me. I mean, you can't build an education plan if you don't know what the disability is. I mean, but it doesn't have to have a name. So if they want to call it one kind of dyslexia or something else, that doesn't matter. The point is you need to understand what the disability is.
Can I participate? I the one that I made the question because my son recently was tested, but they told me that by law, they weren't allowed to tell me what kind of disability he had.
What?
So I know, didn't make sense to me. Well, because like I kind of have my own thinking between having dyslexia or ADHD. But they told me that by law, they're not allowed to tell me. And I asked them like, so you had the same treatment for everybody, no matter what the disability is, right?
Yes,
But-
and that's exactly what's wrong with the system. Did you have a report you were reading in your hand?
Yeah, but the thing is that my son really need the support, so I kind of sign it just to get started, but I don't have truly what exactly it is that he has.
So you can ask
Because-
for, you can, if you think the services will start now because of that, fine. But if you need more information, you can ask for another assessment.
Okay. Okay.
You can also ask for an independent assessment and then ask for compensation if you get a private assessment. And sometimes those are expensive. That information comes back and is found to be valid, and they act on the information in the new assessment. The school district must compensate you for that assessment. So if it costs $200, I'm making something up, and you pay for it and they say, oh, well, this is very revealing. I understand this, and now that'll tell us how we're going to modify this program, and we'll add this into his program. Okay, fine. And then you submit your bill and say, you should compensate me for this because you found this assessment to be correct.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
But
for the
you could just ask them to do it over again. I mean, sometimes
Okay.
I've changed assessors. I mean, assessments are tricky especially for nonverbal kids, as Michelle would understand. You need to have somebody who understands how to assess someone who does not speak with words.
Well, this is not the case.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, just because you're a school psychologist or have those letters behind your name, it does not know you know anything. It means you necessarily are qualified for this particular assessment.
I get it. I get it. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Our meetings go usually until 8:30, so it's about time. And I would like to thank you so much, Pat, for all what you've shared with us. Thank you. Amazing. Thank you,
It's my
everyone,
pleasure.
being here. I want to end with sharing a resource that SEPTA created in honor of Black History Month.
Oh, I saw that. That was very good.
Yeah, let me just share my screen very quickly. And it's on our SEPTA page. We have a SEPTA website. And you can click on the videos, on these videos, and there's a YouTube video on each one of those. And learn about those amazing people,
Yeah, I've seen them.
disability leaders. And they, like right now, they're amazing. So they're very inspiring. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you asking me. I'm glad to have been here. And Michelle, don't worry about trying to pay speakers, because most of us who do this do it because we were there back in the day, and we all need to stick together, and you need to build the support. I would never accept money from a parent group, never. It just doesn't even make sense. Even when I've had to fly down to someplace and do it, it just is not, it doesn't make, it's not right.
We appreciate your time so much.
Thank you, thank you. So call me again if you need something, and we can, and you please give my email in the chat, or I don't know if you published it or what, but you can put my email out, and if anyone wants to contact me, I'd be happy to speak to you. And if you write it in Spanish, I will get it translated, and I will get back to you. I do appreciate people reaching out for help because it's a confusing system. And there's many, many dimensions, and there's many different ways of doing it. And all of our kids are very different. So there's no cookie cutters that fit any of us. So I thank you for asking me, and I wish you all well. And Maeve, I really appreciate meeting you and seeing that a special ed director is up at this hour with a bunch of parents. It's really very invigorating.
Thank you. This is the best bunch of parents I've ever worked with. It's really, really privileged to be here and to hear you too. Thank you so much.
Great. All righty then.
We're
Thank
very
you.
happy. We're very lucky to have Maeve. She's part of us. She's here every single month.
My special ed director, and I do call her mine because she was my special ed director. And I absolutely adored her. And we ended up living 10 blocks away from each other. I can remember taking my kids down to the special ed or Board of Education to her office. And I'd give her one of my kids and I was nursing the other one because they were so little at the time. And that's how we had our inclusion task force meeting. So near and dear to my heart, we both taught each other a lot. And I see that relationship in all of you. So I wish you all well, and please feel free to reach out again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you, Nora. Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the info. It was great. Thanks.
Thank you, Amanis. I thought there were more people registered, no?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I have to go back and check how many there were.